Hey guys, welcome back to Pep Talks. I'm your host, Lexi Cardosa, and today I am here with two amazing guests, Savannah Welch and Raymond Ryder. How are you guys doing today?
We're good.
I'm doing good.
Yeah.
Great. Well, are you ready for your first ever Pep quiz?
No.
Well, we're gonna do it anyway. Okay. Favorite color?
Purple.
Blue.
What would your last meal be?
First thing I thought of was spaghetti, but probably not. I don't know.
I really like sushi.
Sushi,
I do
okay.
like sushi.
Any pet peeves? Oh my gosh, it's so
It's okay.
It's life, whatever.
I hate being interrupted. I think that's like the worst for me.
Okay.
I don't like people who are like condescending.
Okay.
That really gets on my nerves.
Okay, one thing on your bucket list.
I'd like to at some point go out of the country and travel a little bit.
Okay. Any places in particular?
Honestly, Italy
Ooh.
sounds really cool. Like I'd love to go to the Basilica of St. Paul.
Okay.
That'd be really cool.
Amazing.
For me, okay, when I traveled to Ireland, I saw that they had like a national surfing competition, and so I love surfing, and so I think one of my bucket list items would probably be to like go to Ireland and enter in that surfing competition.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, and lastly, one thing you guys love about yourselves.
I don't know, for me, I always say this just because it's like the first thing in personality quizzes that I get, and it's something that's like relevant to my everyday life, but I'm pretty creative, so I would say like I do love that about myself.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say I have a decent ability in self-reflection, and I think that's important. And I try to exercise that as much as possible.
Amazing. Okay, well, it's a beautiful day today, and I'm so excited to have you guys here. Everybody, we are talking about how being uncomfortable is better, so get comfortable being uncomfortable. So you guys, has there been a time when, I guess that was a turning point in your life, that was extremely uncomfortable, but a time that also you were really able to kind of grow from that experience? Raymond, do you want to start us off?
Sure, I'll start. So on April 17th, 2018, I was on Southwest Flight 1380, which for people who don't know was a flight from LaGuardia to Dallas Love Field, in which the left engine, which I was sitting on, it exploded. The containment ring broke because the explosion was so concussive. Shrapnel flew back, damaged the fuselage, damaged the wing, and shattered a window. A woman was partially sucked out and she died. So obviously that was an uncomfortable situation to be in.
Yes.
But really that's not the most uncomfortable situation in my story. It was dealing with the idea of getting back on another flight, because I go to school in California, but I'm from Texas. All my family's in Texas, so like I can't make the drive every holiday. So I was like, I have to get back on a plane, which was a very uncomfortable idea for me. And I ran into this psychological behavioral technique known as exposure therapy, which is a pretty common therapeutic technique used in behavioral therapy, in which you were voluntarily is very important, voluntarily exposed to an anxiety-inducing stimuli for you. And so, for example, if you're scared of snakes, it would be, a picture of a snake, or, I don't think anybody would put you in a room with a snake. But for me, obviously, it was flying, it was airplanes. And so this idea that to overcome your discomfort, your anxiety, your fears, you have to voluntarily put yourself in that uncomfortable situation to overcome it, is a mind-boggling idea. I mean, it doesn't seem self-apparent. It's not the first thing we think of.
Yeah,
we
it's
think
very
of how do we
unconventional.
overcome our fears. And so eventually, after a long time of watching videos of planes, looking in the skies as planes go by, it started off small with things like that, and incrementally I worked up to getting on a plane and flying. And I've flown on, I can't remember the exact number now, but multiple flights, and obviously plan on continuing.
Yeah.
It's just that idea that to overcome your discomfort, you have to put yourself in that uncomfortable situation.
Yeah. And I feel like too, like you can't let fear get in the way of things that we're going to do, because you could have easily just kind of never flown again. Like that's an extremely traumatic experience, but instead you actually kind of put yourself in a position to where you knew you were going to overcome it, and you really took the leap of faith. You got on another plane, and what was that experience like the first time you actually got onto another plane? Like, was there anxiety? Like, what was going on for you?
Yeah. So I'm gonna be honest. I really don't remember it that well, but I just remember this pervasive sense of like anxiety. I mean, and that's why I think I don't remember it well, because the experience I wasn't in the moment. I was just so anxious. But what's incredible about exposure therapy is that it never really gets rid of your anxiety. I'll always have this anxiety about flying and things like that. But what it does is it gives you the competency and the strength to overcome that discomfort. And what you said about, you really can't let fear overcome you, or whatever you said in that vein, is true. The American Psychological Association makes very clear when they do talk about exposure therapy, and any therapist that uses exposure therapy makes very clear that if you run from that anxiety-inducing stimuli, it's counter-therapeutic in the sense that it reinforces the anxiety that you feel as central to your identity, and it reinforces the trauma from that experience, and it can exacerbate your anxiety exponentially. And for me, my knee-jerk reaction was, in the experience, I'm not getting on a plane again.
Yeah.
But then after thought, I'm like, I have to get on a plane again. And so really for me, there was no, after obviously my initial knee-jerk reaction, there was no, I can never get on a plane again. It's like, I have to.
And you knew you were going to do it.
Yeah. And so the initial experience of getting back on a plane was very discomfortable.
Yes.
But it gets better. It gets better every time I fly. Even now, I still have anxiety, but every time. My last flight was really, really incredible, actually.
Great.
Really empowering, honestly.
Well, I feel like too, I feel like you really need to lean into it and accept that discomfort until, like you even said, you can move on from it. Because I feel like for a lot of my life, I kind of was stuck in this cycle of always being uncomfortable, and every single time there was nothing else I was gonna do but run from that, whether it be hide what I'm going through to my friends or just do things to make everybody else uncomfortable, but I was uncomfortable. It didn't matter. I was just always gonna go away from it. And I kind of, thinking back now, I see myself in every chapter of my life ending up in the exact same situation that I had always been in the past, and always feeling exactly the same, but not knowing how the heck to get out of it. Instead, I was just like, okay, well, I'm comfortable in chaotic situations because that's how my life was growing up, so I'm just going to keep surrounding myself by chaotic people so I feel comfortable, which is just odd because most people would want to get out of that, but that's where I was the most comfortable, so that's okay, that's where I'm going to stay. And it just continues and continues and continues until you finally break the cycle, lean into something, and try something different. That's when you really can actually grow from it or try something new.
Right. And that's a perfectly normative reaction as well, because as humans, we crave what we know. We crave this order that we're used to, this routine, and breaking that is really jarring to us.
It's like breaking a bad habit.
That's where growth comes from.
Yeah.
That's the only place growth can happen.
Exactly.
True. That's so true.
For you, what about any experiences, uncomfortable, difficult, whatever it may be, that you really felt like you either learned from or just grew tremendously?
Definitely. I have a lot, but I think for the sake of this, I have two that actually have kind of shaped me into the person I am, especially this year, since one of these events actually happened pretty recently. But the first one I'll get into is, so when I was about 6 or 5 years old, I was diagnosed with cholesteatoma, which is a benign skin tumor that grows in your ear, and it actually damages your fine ear bones, and it can actually lead you to become deaf. And so when I was about 5, I was diagnosed for the first time. And during that time, I didn't really know what it was. I didn't know what was happening. I just knew I had to have a surgery. It was painful. I had like these bandages around my ear. I looked like I had just come out from like a war zone. After the surgery, it was like, it looked pretty grueling, just because that first surgery was pretty significant. And then after that, I had another surgery because the cholesteatoma came back. So the doctor was pretty concerned. He didn't really know what was going on, and so I had my second surgery, and finally I had my last surgery because it came back a second time. So I had 3 surgeries before the age of 7 on my right ear, and I lost most of my hearing in my right ear, and so that's something that I've always had to live with. And I had my last surgery on it in 2015, where my doctor went in and he repaired all of the mastoid, like kind of fixed it up. I'd had a lot of issues with my hearing, and so it was more of a cosmetic surgery just to make it look a little better on the outside and make it more functional, because if you look behind my ear, I am missing all of the bones right behind all of it, so it's not flush and flat. It's like concave. And so from those surgeries, I still, my hearing is gone in my right ear, and so when it comes to difficult situations and uncomfortable situations for my hearing, nobody really knows about it. It's not something that I love sharing. I only share it if I feel like it's important to me, or if it's important for the person to know. And from dealing with those hearing loss issues, my immediate reaction and dealing with these things over time has just been kind of uncomfortable, just because, I know what I'm going through. I know that I can't hear. I know why I'm doing things, but nobody else does. And so people think, oh, she's like ditzy, or her head's in the clouds, or like, oh, she's not with it, and it's actually a physical disability. And even if people know that, I've had people know that and still have said, wow, what's wrong with her, even though they know that there's a reason why I'm acting the way I'm acting. And so it's something that I've always had to deal with. And so being uncomfortable with a disability is hard, because you kind of take it out on yourself, even though you know you can't do anything about it, and it's not something that you even want to change, because it makes you who you are, but it's also something that you shouldn't have to feel like you have to overcome yourself or overcome what you're dealing with. But it is uncomfortable because it's like a cognitive dissonance, and you're trying to figure out how to navigate your world when you navigate it a little differently from other people. So I think that's one situation that was uncomfortable. And then another actual event that happened this last year was my mom was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer the week after the Woolsey fire. And so I had just come back from Portland. I was visiting my big, and we had like a great week. We had a great time. It was super fun. And my dad picked me up from the airport, and I could tell something was super wrong. Like nothing. He was acting kind of. He acted like he didn't want to tell me something, even though I could tell that he wanted to tell me. And he said that the doctors found something. My mom had felt it in the night. She got up in the middle of the night. She felt something on her chest, and so she called the doctor the next day, and they pulled her in, and they said, we're extremely alarmed. We've never seen anything grow this quickly. It could be a stage 4. It could be terminal. We don't know. All of these things were so not helpful for us, because we didn't. I was fine a week ago. I mean, the shooting and fire happened, but I was fine with my family. Everything was good, and then I came back, and so that time was really difficult, because, like I said before, knowing what you're going through, but nobody else knows what you're going through. Nobody else knows why you're more quiet, why you're like having like long discussions with your family members, why you're going through all this stuff. Like, you don't want to have to share this, because you don't want to make other people uncomfortable.
Exactly. Yeah. I feel like not only are we always looking to be comfortable ourselves, we're always trying to keep people also very comfortable. And I feel like a lot of these issues that we're going through, like, they're either stigmatized or they're just not talked about, and people don't really know how to respond. So then therefore we kind of bottle it up and deal with it ourselves, instead of just putting it out there, because of course we need support, but we don't want them to feel uncomfortable, and we don't want them to just be in a weird position. And it's so easy to kind of be alone a lot of the time when people all around you are going through the exact same thing, but nobody wants to share it, because nobody wants to be uncomfortable. And it's just like this concept of being uncomfortable is just so, like, it makes sense, because we're growing up, we're conditioned to always be comfortable, to put ourselves in comfortable positions, to stay comfortable. And the second you get any sort of feeling of discomfort, I feel like the first thing you want to do is run. You want to seek comfort in something else. And I feel like a lot of times we seek comfort in unhealthy ways, because I don't think we're really meant to seek comfort. I think we are meant to be uncomfortable so we're allowed to grow, versus going back to something that's just going to coddle us or kind of soothe the discomfort, whether it be drugs, alcohol, people, quotes, music, we need to find a healthier way to really kind of find comfort or just embrace the discomfort rather than always looking for something else to turn to. Like, what are your thoughts? What do you think?
I do agree. I feel like we take comfort in whatever is most convenient or closest to us, and it's usually not the healthiest thing, and channeling that into a positive outlet is like the best thing you can do for yourself, especially when you're going through a hard time or you might not even know how you're feeling. And that's something that I have experienced from time to time, is like when there's so much happening, I just don't know how I'm feeling. And so like distancing yourself from other people's emotions and making sure you know how you're feeling, where you're at, what's going on is like the healthiest thing you can do for yourself, because otherwise, like, you're the only person that can help yourself. Like, people can make you feel good, but ultimately it's how you perceive how they're treating you that's making you feel good.
Exactly.
You know?
And I agree. I mean, we're raised to be comfortable. You know, we're raised to seek comfort in what we know, which in many ways is good. I mean, you want to ground yourself in what you know, but you destroy any chance for growth when you slowly live in that. And what comes to mind is this phenomenon of confirmation bias that is really pervasive right now, it seems. Politics comes to mind because we seem to live in a very political age. But everybody wants to confirm their own biases that they hold because that's where they're comfortable.
That's what they know.
This is what they know, and they want to live in that. And anything that pushes the boundaries, anything that makes them uncomfortable, is instantly rejected. I mean, it's you run from it, which I think is completely unhealthy.
It's very
completely unhealthy to have a culture that's totally based on that concept.
So what can we do, like, to change it? Like, what can we do to get more people to lean into that discomfort? And I, for me personally, feel like a lot of it kind of has to go back with how you view yourself and the relationship you have with yourself. Like, a while back, I had a huge kind of like falling out with my friends, and it wasn't even really that situation that was uncomfortable. It was how I felt about myself afterwards that was uncomfortable. I went from being so used to, like I said, being in these chaotic situations, trying to fix people. That's what I was used to, and the second that was all ripped away from me, now I was left spending so much time alone, which I was not used to, and I had to learn to really like be comfortable in my own skin by myself, because if I can't sit in a room with my own thoughts, there's a huge problem with that. And so for me, it was like kind of like taking that time to like accept the fact that, Lexi, you're going to be alone. You're going to have to deal with this one way or another. And the 20 years you spent running, like that time, it has to come to an end. And I feel like through that, I was able to learn so much about myself. I was just answering to myself, doing things that I personally enjoyed. And I feel like when I came out of that, like, I was just such like a bigger person. I was like, wow, like, I actually know myself. I know what I like and I know what I want. I created PeppTalks during that time. And it was just like this time of like, wow, like, it's about me for once. And I think now that I'm not saying I fully am, but I'm more comfortable with myself, I feel like I kind of take less from other people and I kind of know what I want, and it's more easy for me to make decisions, and kind of seeing that growth of where I was a year ago and where I am now. And the number one thing that changed was I decided to lean into that discomfort. And I just feel like for me, that was like one of the greatest lessons I've ever learned. And it's like, so now it's like, how do we get other people to kind of embrace that and accept that?
Right.
For me, it is sharing my experience. I think that personal anecdotes are very powerful if used in the correct context. And if I feel that my experience and my story can help someone through something, I share it freely. I mean, I have no qualms with being vulnerable and opening up to someone. And I think that not only encourages growth for the other person, but for myself. And that I learned how this story, what is the nature of this story? You know, how does it help people? What do I want to say with the story?
I feel like the more you open up and the more you share, it does inspire people to do the exact same thing. And I kind of see it as like educating through testimony, and rather giving them stats or all this stuff, like educate them through what you've personally gone through, because there's a good chance they can relate. But even if they can't relate, it's coming from somebody that they know, that they care about, and just that alone is they're like, okay, well, if she can do it, if she can share this, then I feel like I can be more open to kind of share my truth or put myself in an uncomfortable position, because look what it did for her. She decided to lean into it, and now look where she is, so I can do the same. And I feel like that's like a huge thing, that the more we do it, I feel like it will kind of just be this ripple effect that more people kind of join the movement into being uncomfortable.
Yeah. It's true. I would agree with that too. I think that we just distance ourselves and like don't want to deal with that kind of stuff and have to navigate through something that we're not sure about, because uncertainty is so scary.
Yeah.
It's like silence. Like, I read this book this summer called Silence in the Age of Noise, and it was so helpful because it talked about how we're uncomfortable with silence. We're uncomfortable with like the emptiness of what we don't know.
Yes.
And that's, I think we busy ourselves so much too, and this includes like unhealthy habits and things, but we become so busy and so consumed with like doing everything.
Yes.
The Pepperdine student mentality of just literally being in everything, being in Greek life, being involved in like NSO, being involved SGA. Like there's so much that we could be doing that we don't want to miss out on, but when we actually like take the time to be living in that silence and living in that uncomfortableness, we realize that we're in a much better place because we are comfortable with ourselves at our like basic point of just having nothing interfering with who we are. It's just us alone with ourselves, and once you get that basis affirmed, then like you can go forward and help other people realize that too, because it's so important just knowing that you are okay where you're at, you know.
Exactly.
And discomfort is always, it's not always something that you take on.
Yeah.
Like for me, it would be getting on a flight. But I mean, the Pepperdine mentality that you mentioned about you have to be involved in everything, you know, maybe, and this relates to what you said, maybe it is learning to spend time just with yourself, you know, maybe like you're an extremely extroverted person and you can be with tons of people all at the same time, you're involved in everything, you know, maybe develop yourself and learn to spend time with yourself, and in that way you can grow and learn how to be alone.
Exactly.
Which is a quality that is important.
Yeah, and I feel like honestly it's all a journey. Like none of this stuff happens overnight. It took me 21 years to get to a point where I was okay being uncomfortable, and I feel like for everyone they're kind of on like that similar path, and for everyone it's going to happen at different times. You can't just tell people, okay, it's time for you to be uncomfortable and expect them to listen. It's kind of one of those things that where they just need to be uncomfortable when they're ready to be uncomfortable. Like it's not something that just like happens one day. It's like you're going to be in a situation and you're going to either make the choice to run or to lean into it, and that choice is really going to determine whether you grow or whether you just continue to stay the same person.
I mean, in my experience, it obviously wasn't, you know, it was Southwest Flight 1380, and then like next day get on a flight like I'm fine. I mean, it was very incremental. I mean, I started out, literally I was just walking around Pepperdine's campus and I would just like look up and I'd be like, oh, there's a plane in the sky. And like that was anxiety inducing to me in that moment. But that was how I exposed myself. And then I worked up to, you know, like watching a video clip with people flying or something like that, you know, driving past an airport, things like that. It's not going to happen all
overnight.
at once.
It's a process. It's just going to slowly, the more, like you said, expose yourself to it, the more you'll just be more comfortable with it. And then I feel like that will just lead you to like, it doesn't even have to be like necessarily an uncomfortable thing, but you're slowly being more and more comfortable with uncomfortable things, and then it just kind of happens.
Oh, definitely. And I think each stage and season that you're in prepares you for the next one.
Yes.
So if you start off, like you said, this doesn't just happen overnight, because those seasons have to go by and you have to be able to slowly develop yourself for the next stage.
Exactly.
And I think that was something that we talked, we went to Hillsong Church this last weekend, and the pastor talked about that. He said, like, you know, God wants us and prepares us for the next season. Like he wants us to go into that next season not concerned about the last one and not worried about the last one. And so often we fall back on that old season because that's comfortable to us, and the next season is so uncomfortable and it's so unknown. It's like the same thing, like this unknown silence, this unknown like era that's before us, we just don't know what to do with. And so we dwell on the past, we dwell on what was, because that is comfortable, and that's something that we can work with and kind of figure out in our own way, and something that is like real to us. And so focusing on that too, and focusing on the future, and focusing on the unknown and the possibilities of the unknown, and not being scared of the negatives, but knowing that there will obviously be positives in the unknown in the future. That's so important too.
And something that's implicit, I think, in what you said, in like the idea of it being a process, is that it's a continual growing of your boundaries. It's like, for what you said, let's say like your mean was like extroversion. You're used to being around your friends, but then you had a falling out, and you had to learn to be by yourself. And so that was kind of like, I use the term mean, so I go to the other statistical term of like standard deviation. You were kind of like expanding your standard deviation to where you could spend time with yourself.
Exactly.
And it's a continual process.
Like to this day, like I'm still working on it. Like I still don't love being, like I still at the end of the day would prefer to be around other people, but I'm finally at the point where I am okay when I am alone. And I feel like just getting to that point, like of course I can continue to grow and to grow and to grow, but I feel like taking that leap once, I feel like just opens the door to me like, now I'm okay with being uncomfortable. Like I know, I don't really like the way it makes me feel, but I'm okay with it. And I feel like that acceptance is what's gonna allow me to continue to grow and to continue to lean into it, which it's just exciting to kind of get to that point where you're like, I finally made it.
I know. I can finally be alone and be fine.
Fine, exactly.
That's so true. I went through that freshman year, especially because I have like crazy FOMO. I have to be doing everything. And when I was in high school, I was pretty introverted. I played piano a lot, and that was funny because with my hearing, like people would always ask me like, why are you in choir? Why are you in band? Why do you do this stuff if you like can't hear? And it's like, well, who knows why? I just enjoy it, and that's something that's part of like who I am too. But I remember I would spend so much time alone playing the piano, doing this, doing that. And then when I went to college and I was a senior in high school, I was like, I don't feel like I want to be alone anymore. Like I don't feel like I need that as much. I feel like I need more interaction. I need more this. I need more that. And so over time, I noticed that like developed, especially last year. Whenever I was alone, I was like, I have to be doing something. I have to be going to meet someone. I have to be working on something. And I never just sat and enjoyed being alone. And I never like fully like rested that way. And that's something that hurt me last semester when things were really hard. And when my mom was going through all of her stuff and I was in a relationship and when everything was just like a hot mess, like I did not take that alone time. And I did not get that time I needed. And it hurt me so much more. And it made things harder for me. And I could have easily made it better if I had just distanced myself and inserted that space and that time. But I was uncomfortable with letting go of like people that I wanted to be with or like time with other people. And so I think that that's something that I learned recently because I didn't realize how important being alone really is.
And even if you know like a situation with people is bad, it's still more comfortable to be with them than it is to remove yourself. Because at the end of the day, you're not that comfortable in the situation, but it's still more comfortable than what might happen when you're actually alone. And I feel like that's a very like, it's life. It's just something you learn along the way.
I mean, life in itself is uncomfortable.
Oh my God.
Every day we're encountering something
Every day I'm uncomfortable, yeah.
Well, I feel like we have done a very good job of kind of like leaning into that discomfort, and I think we're kind of at a point where we're okay being uncomfortable. So can you guys give your best pep talk to someone who maybe is ready to take that leap and is ready to kind of step outside of their comfort zone? Can you give them your best pep talk?
You want to go?
I would love to.
Amazing.
Sure. Just right off the top of my head. I like to point out that if you don't take the leap, if you don't lean into that discomfort, it will inevitably worsen the discomfort in general. And so you're better off, exponentially better off, in just leaning into that discomfort, undertaking it, and through that process, overcoming it.
Amazing.
That's the best I got.
That's good. Good job.
I like it. Okay. I would feel inspired by that.
Okay.
Oh, that's hard. I mean, oh, that's hard. Okay. You did a good job. Now I
Give your best pep talk to somebody going through a difficult time in their lives.
Yeah, I'd probably just say it does get better, but it does take time. And I know that time isn't always what you want. You want things immediately. I want things immediately. We all want things immediately. But giving that time and letting something organically just work itself out honestly saves so much when it comes to like your own needs, your own emotions, dealing with other people, making relationships last. And so I would say that it does get better. Meditate, pray, like do what you need to do to get through a difficult time or an uncomfortable time. because sometimes they are longer than you would want them to be, and sometimes you go through your own kind of mental journey and emotional journey trying to figure out how you feel about yourself and about the situation. But if you focus on where you're at and stay grounded and stay present, that's something that I learned helps me so much through difficult times. And for example, like taking the cancer situation, like it sucks, it does suck when someone that you really, really care about could not be there in a couple weeks. Like when I first found out, this is long, when I first found out about my mom, like she straight up, I remember I was on the floor sobbing in the kitchen and she was on the floor sobbing. My dad was on the floor sobbing. My brother was not there, but he was probably on the floor sobbing somewhere. But it just, those low points, remember those low points, because you know that you've been there and it can't get worse. Like it can get worse, but I mean, it can get worse, but like when it comes down to it, you know how to handle it.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's the most important thing, is knowing how to handle it, because you've already handled it before and you've already been through it. And so once you're at that level, like it can get worse, but remember where you were at in that moment, because you are strong enough to get through even those moments. And so I think just recognizing your strength, recognizing who you are, and recognizing where you are going is the most important thing when it comes to these difficult times and uncomfortable situations.
Wow. Amazing. Well,
way to show me
so
you guys are both great.
No, you do.
Well, thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for being uncomfortable with me. This has been amazing. And PeppTalks community, thank you so much for being with us. Take a leap of faith, do something that scares you, and just let's all be uncomfortable. See you next week.